We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara Amud Aleph and Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 13a. On the previous summit, the Gemara quoted the Mishnah which said that when it comes to mitzvahs aseh, Yom HaKippurim Nisoar HaMishtaleach LaAzazel on Yom Kippur is mechaper. And the question was that when it comes to mitzvahs aseh, if a person does teshuvah, the person is forgiven immediately, gets a kapara immediately. What does he need to wait till Yom Kippur for? And the Gemara now continues and answers, Ba'omed b'mardo. Our Mishnah is talking about a situation where he continues to rebel, meaning to say when he does not do teshuvah. And the idea is v'Rebbe. The idea is that our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rebbe, that Rebbe holds Yom Kippur's mechaper even on a situation where the person does not do teshuvah. Titania, as we learned in a brayso, Rebbe Omer, Rebbe says, I'll call averos shebetorah. When it comes to all averos in the Torah, bein asa teshuvah, bein lo asa teshuvah, whether the person did teshuvah or not, Yom HaKippur mechaper, Yom Kippur is mechaper. It's an atonement for those averos chutz, with the exception of the following three. Miporek ol, somebody who throws off the yoke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rashi says it means he's kofer be'ikr, he denies HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he denies the Torah. Umegala panim batorah, somebody who's megala panim batorah, which Rashi understands to mean megala panim batorah, baal divrei Torah bechutzpah, uvegiloi azus panav, that when he's talking divrei Torah, speaking divrei Torah, he treats divrei Torah with chutzpah, he treats it with insolence, that's megala panim batorah. And finally, umefer bris bebasar, mefer bris bebasar is referring to bris milah, somebody does not fulfill the mitzvah of bris milah. Those are the three exceptions. There, a person is not going to get atonement without doing teshuvah. Shemasa teshuvah Yom HaKippur mechaper. By those three, if somebody does teshuvah, Yom Kippur is mechaper. V'imlav, and if not, in Yom HaKippur mechaper, then Yom Kippur is not mechaper. And the Gemara says, my time with the Rebbe. What's the reason of Rebbe? What's the source of this? Titania, as we learned in a brayso, Kidvar Hashem Baza, when it says in the pasuk Kidvar Hashem Baza in Sefer Bamidbar, Zeh HaPorek Ol U'Megala Panim Batorah. That's a reference to the first two, somebody who's Porek Ol, who's Kofer B'ikr, and somebody who's Megala Panim Batorah. Ves Mitzvaso Heifar, and then when the pasuk goes on to say Mitzvaso Heifar, Zeh HaMefer Bris B'Basar, this is talking about somebody who does not fulfill Bris Milah. He kares tikares, and then the pasuk goes on to say he kares tikares, a double language of kares. He kares lifnei Yom HaKippurim. What that means is before Yom Kippur he's cut off, and tikares la'achar Yom HaKippurim, and also he'll be cut off after Yom Kippur. Meaning Yom Kippur is not going to be an atonement for those three if the person does not do teshuvah. Now yachal afilu asa teshuvah. One might think that even if he does teshuvah, he won't be forgiven for these three. Talmud lomar, the pasuk says again, the same pasuk, it finishes avona ba, and what that means is lo amarti. I'm only saying this in a situation where the sin has continued. But if the person did teshuvah, then he can be forgiven even for these three. And the Gemara continues, V'Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan who disagree with the opinion of Rebbe, Rashi explains, V'Rabbanan di islu nami b'shar averos, the Rabbanan who hold even by other averos, the Ein Yom HaKippurim mechaper al she'enon shav, and they hold by all averos you need to do teshuvah. Yom Kippur cannot be mechaper without teshuvah. So Amri Loch, so they have to understand this pasuk in a different fashion. Ha de golilon kra b'hanach telos, when the pasuk over here says something unique about these three averos, la'av b'Yom HaKippurim, we're not talking about something unique by Yom Kippur. You need to always do teshuvah for Yom Kippur to be mechaper. El hikaris tikaris tekamar tikaris la'olam haba. What this means is that by these three, the person is cut off even on olam haba, as we'll see in the Gemara in a moment. Sha'af misa einam emarekes al shalosh halolu below teshuvah. Even misa is not going to cleanse the person for these three without teshuvah. Avol shar averos below teshuvah, but by other averos without teshuvah, nami misa emarekes achar Yom HaKippur. And then already misa, death, will cleanse after Yom Kippur. Avol Yom HaKippur below misa lo. Yom HaKippur without death is not going to cleanse the person. And so again, the Rabbanan understand he kares ba'olam hazeh when it comes to these three, so then he's cut off in this world, and tikares la'olam haba, he'll be cut off in the next world as well. Avona ba, and then when it says avona ba in the pasuk, it means shemasa teshuvah, it means by these three, if the person does do teshuvah of a mace and he dies, then misa mimarekes, then the misa, the death, is going to cleanse the person. But the Gemara continues, Umimatzis mukmis la keRebbe, can you really say that our Mishnah follows Rebbe? V'hamidaseifa Rebbe Yehuda, but from the fact that the end of the Mishnah is Rebbe Yehuda, Reishanami Rebbe Yehuda, wouldn't that imply that the beginning of the Mishnah is also Rebbe Yehuda? And where do we see that the end of the Mishnah is Rebbe Yehuda? The Katani Seifa, because it says at the end of the Mishnah, Echad Yisrael v'echad Kohanim v'echad Kohen Mashuach. It says it's true by Yisraelim and by Kohanim and by the Kohen Mashuach, by the Kohen Gadol, all of them get this kapara. kapara, as Rashi explains, Echad Yisrael mischaper mishara averos b'sorah mishaleach. All these other averos, they can get a kapara through the so'ir hamishaleach la'azazel. That's what it says at the end of the Mishnah. Uman islay haisvar. And who's the one that holds this, that the so'ir hamishaleach is able to atone in all of these situations? It's Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. As Rashi says, Uman islay haisvar de kohanim mischaper mishtaleach. Who's the one that holds that the kohanim get a kapara by the so'ir hamishaleach? That's Rabbi Yehuda. Lakamon b'hai pirka. That's Rabbi Yehuda, as we're going to learn later on in this parak. And so therefore you see that again the end of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, Mechlal Dereisha Rabbi Yehuda. Wouldn't that imply that the beginning of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda as well? How can we say that the Mishnah here is following Rebbe? And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Rebbe, really the Mishnah is Rebbe. V'savar look, Rabbi Yehuda, and it happens to be that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda in this regard, with regards to the fact that the Kohanim are mischabrin b'so'ir ha'mishtaleach. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaye. Abaye said to him, he said to Rav Yosef, Davka ko Amar Mar. Is the master saying this only in one direction? That Rebbe savar like Rabbi Yehuda, that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda with regards to the Sir HaMishtaleach. Avo Rabbi Yehuda lo savar like Rebbe, but Rabbi Yehuda does not hold like Rebbe when it comes to Yom Kippur being a kapara even without teshuvah. O Dilmar, maybe it goes in both directions. The Rebbe savar like Rabbi Yehuda, from the fact that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda with regards to the Sar HaMishtaleach, that it's mechaper for the Kohanim. So af Rabbi Yehuda savar lo nami Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda also agrees with Rebbe that again Yom Kippur can be mechaper even without teshuvah. And miu, nevertheless, urcha demilsa katani. Maybe we were just saying it in the normal way that we would speak. Lameimar the Talmud savar lo karabi. We want to say that the student holds like the Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi would be the student of Rabbi Yehuda. So we were saying that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda, but maybe it really goes in the other direction as well. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe as well. Amar lei. So he said back to him. He responded in yes. Da'avka kamin. I was saying it specifically in one direction. Rebbe savar like Rabbi Yehuda, that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Ava Rabbi Yehuda lo savar like Rebbe. But Rabbi Yehuda actually does not hold like Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a person does need to do teshuvah in order for Yom Kippur to be mechaper. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Yachol Yeh Yom HaKippur mechaper al shavim ve'al she'ein on shavim. One might think that Yom Kippur can be a kapara for those who do teshuvah and for those who do not do teshuvah. V'dinu, and we can learn as follows: Hoel v'chatos v'yasham mechaperin. Since we know that a korban chatos and a korban asham provide a kapara, v'Yom HaKippur mechaper, and we know that Yom Kippur provides a kapara and atonement. Machatos v'yasham in mechaperin ela al hashavim. Just like chatos and asham is only a kapara on those who do teshuvah. Af Yom HaKippur in mechaper ela al hashavim. So to Yom Kippur, it's only a kapara on those who do teshuvah. But the Gemara says, Malachatas v'yasham shein mechaper al hamezid keshogeg. But maybe you'll say, just like chatas and asham, they are not a kapara on doing it on purpose. They're only a kapara for doing an aver by mistake. Tomer liyom kippurim shem mechaper al hamezid keshogeg. Whereas with Yom Kippur, it's a kapara on mezid and shogeg. It's a kapara whether it's done on purpose or by mistake. And hoel mechaper al hamezid keshogeg. And since that's true, the Yom Kippur goes so far that it can be an atonement for mezid and shogeg. So maybe we'll argue yechaper al shavim v'al she'ein on shavim. Maybe we should argue it should be a kapara whether a person does teshuvah, whether a person does not do teshuvah. And so therefore the brayso concludes, Talmud lomar, the pasuk says ach, it says the word ach, cholak, ach is like a chol, it's cholak, it's like a division, it's like an exclusion, and the idea is therefore that it's a limitation. Yom Kippur, according to this brayso, is only going to be mechaper on those who do teshuvah, and stam sifra, money. Now in general, when you have an unattributed sifra, which is this brayso, who does that follow? Rabbi Yehuda, that follows Rabbi Yehuda. The Kamran, what is this brayso saying? Shavim in, lo shavim lo. It's saying those who do teshuvah get the kapara, and those who do not do teshuvah do not. And so you see that Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi in this regard. Rashi explains, Acholak ach be'osar lachodesh hashvi hazeh Yom HaKippur mu. Pasuk says the word ach when it introduces Yom Kippur. V'chol achin v'rakin miyutin, when you have the word ach, when you have the word rak, that's an exclusion, it's a limitation. L'lamedcha shepa'amim she'ein Yom HaKippur mechaper, to say sometimes Yom Kippur is not mechaper, meaning without teshuvah. And stam sifra, Torah's Kohanim. Sifra refers to Torah's Kohanim. That's a brayso of Torah's Kohanim. Rabbi Yehuda, it follows Rabbi Yehuda. So again, we see that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in this regard. But the Gemara continues, V'rami stam sifra, but we have a contradiction, one sifra against another sifra. The following brayso seems to contradict the brayso we just said above. The Tanya, because we learned in another brayso, Yachol lo yeh Yom HaKippur mechaper, one might think that Yom Kippur would not be mechaper, el imkein hisanebo, unless the person, he fasts on Yom Kippur, v'karo mikra kodesh, and he calls it mikra kodesh, v'lo asabo melach, and he doesn't do melacha, meaning I might think that Yom Kippur only is effective if the person is going to observe Yom Kippur properly. But lo isanabo, if he doesn't fast, v'lo kara mikra kodesh, he doesn't call it kodesh, v'yasa b'malach, does malacha. So then minayin, so then from where do we know that Yom Kippur is still a kapara? Talmud lomer Yom Kippurim, who it says Yom Kippurim, mikol makom, meaning Yom Kippurim, who in any situation, it sounds like from this brisa that the kapara, the atonement, happens whether the person does teshuvah or not. Rashi explains, lo karu mikra kodesh, what does it mean he doesn't call it kodesh? It means lo kiblu biberchosav, he doesn't accept it with the proper bracha. Lomar mekadesh Yisrael v'yom HaKippurim, to say mekadesh Yisrael v'yom HaKippurim. So in any case, again, in this particular brisa, in the second brisa, it sounds like it's a kapara even without doing teshuvah. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Abaye says, lo kasha, it's not difficult. Ha-Rebbe v'ha-Rebbe Yehuda, one case it's Rebbe, and in the other case it's Rebbe Yehuda. Again, according to Rebbe, a person does not need to do teshuvah in order to get kapara, but according to Rebbe Yehuda, the person does need to do teshuvah in order to get the kapara. Rava Amar, Rava says, Hava ha-Rebbe, really both brises, it could be their Rebbe. And what's happening over here is as follows, Umoda Rebbe bekares de Yuma, Rebbe would admit, when it comes to kares of Yom Kippur itself, that there already, the person is not going to get an automatic kapara. Because if you don't say that, kares de Yom HaKippurim, l'Rebbe lesla, you're never going to have kares on Yom Kippur. In other words, if you're going to say that Yom Kippur is an automatic atonement, and it's even an automatic atonement for the violation of Yom Kippur itself, for that kares, then you'll never have kares on Yom Kippur. And so that's all the other brisa was saying. The brisa which said that you need to do teshuvah, that was talking specifically about a violation which incurs kares on Yom Kippur itself. There, of course, you need to do teshuvah, otherwise you'll never have kares in such a situation. But the Gemara says, 1 second, why can't you find a situation? We can find a situation, even if you said Yom Kippur automatically gives kapara, even for its own kares, we could find a situation where you would get kares. For example, let's say the person violated Yom Kippur at night, and then he died. Because then the daytime doesn't come in order to give that kapara, because it's the day of Yom Kippur that affects the kapara. He already died at that point. And so the Gemara continues, Ella Ema rather say, and Rashi explains, Umoda Rebbe bekares de Yuma, Rebbe would admit by kares of Yom Kippur itself, Ha detanya kamaisa, meaning that first brisa, the Eino mechaper al she'eino neshavin, which again it said that there's no kapar if you don't do teshuvah, bekares shel Yom HaKippurim ka'amar, that's talking about kares on Yom Kippur itself, shel inoi v'shel malacha, let's say of affliction, a person's supposed to afflict himself and not do malacha on Yom Kippur, avol al kol shar averos, but on all other averos, mechaper afal pisha, also but malacha v'lo esanebo, so then it would be mechaper even if the person did malacha on Yom Kippur, he didn't fast, he didn't do the proper teshuvah. Because if you don't say that, the v'kares de yume mo de Rebbe de lo mechaper, that Rebbe by the kares of Yom Kippur itself, Rebbe admits that it's not a kapara. V'tema da kares de yom mechaper, you're going to say that it's an automatic kapara. So then kares de Yom HaKippurim less leila Rebbe bitmiya. You're never going to have kares on Yom Kippur. Imkein lama kasav rachmona b'Yom HaKippurim kares. Why would the pasuk even say on Yom Kippur you get kares? B'shlama shar krisas the imayis kodem Yom HaKippurim lo echaper. I understand other scenarios of kares. If he dies before Yom Kippur, he won't get that kapara. Aval hanach lomali, but you don't need to write kares by Yom Kippur. Hakiyavar alem mechaper lahayom, because the very day itself is going to be a kapara. That's why over there it must be that you have to do the proper teshuvah. Otherwise, it's not going to be an automatic kapara. And again, then the Gemara asked, well, it is possible to have kares. Let's say he violates Yom Kippur at night, but then he dies, so he never has the opportunity to have the day of Yom Kippur as a kapara. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis.